The sun was already beginning to dip below the horizon, coloring the streets with a golden hue. Evening was one of Marianne Brown's favorite times of day. She had always believed that it was during these hours that one could see how her neighborhood was doing, what changes were taking place, what problems the residents were facing. She walked slowly down the street toward home, feeling the strength and confidence that living in this neighborhood gave her. Marianne was a well-known and respected figure in the neighborhood. She was not only an elderly woman, but also a symbol of wisdom and life experience, a keeper of tradition and a link between generations. Marianne was holding a small bag of groceries that she had bought at a small local store. She loved the store because there she could always meet familiar faces and exchange a few kind words. Marianne knew almost everyone in the neighborhood by name and loved to share her advice and words of wisdom. As she approached her house, a small yard with blooming rose bushes greeted her. She smiled and walked up to the porch. When she opened the door, she found herself in a cozy home where the walls were decorated with pictures of her family and years of awards for her active work in the neighborhood. Sitting in the kitchen was David Brown, her son, a tall and confident man in his early 40s. He was an FBI agent and was often at the center of important events in the neighborhood. Despite his work in law enforcement, David remained loyal to the residents and to his mother. "Hi, Mom," David said, tearing his gaze away from his laptop. He was aware of all the local happenings and understood that the neighborhood needed attention and care. "Hey, son, how are you?" Marianne replied, setting the grocery bag on the table and pulling out a jar of cookies. "Yeah, it's okay, but I know there's a lot to do in the neighborhood. Mom, you always say there are young guys here causing trouble. What's going on there now?" Marianne sighed and sank into the chair opposite David. She poured a cup of tea and took the first sip. "David, you know how much our neighborhood means to me. I see these boys lost in their lives every day. They grow up without fathers, learning from those who lead them astray. I feel sorry for them, but sometimes they become a problem for the whole community. Sometimes their aggression gets out of control and they start breaking into houses, robbing and damaging property." David nodded, listening to his mother. He always respected her opinion and advice, because he knew that Marianne was someone who really cared about everyone in their neighborhood. "But Mom, you try to help them, don't you? You give them advice and find ways to teach them something useful." "Yes, son, I try to set them on the path of goodness. I tell them that life can be different, that they can learn, work, become leaders in the neighborhood, but not all of them listen. Many of them think their respect can only be earned through force and fear." Marianne looked up at the picture of her late husband on the wall. He was the one who had always helped her to remain steadfast and resolute in all situations. "Remember, David, each of these boys is someone's son. Maybe their mothers and fathers once dreamed that their children would become successful and happy people, but something went wrong, and now I have to help not only you and your coworkers, but these guys themselves. I have to show them that there's another way in life, a way where respect, honesty and hard work are the real strength." "I know, Mom. I've been thinking about it, too, but we have to be careful. There are a lot of guys who just want money and power, and they can be easily led astray." "Yes, son, but even in the most difficult situations, you can find a way out. You and I are part of this neighborhood. We must protect it, help its residents and give them faith in a better future. We must show that we are a strong community that is not afraid of challenges and is ready to protect its future." Marianne was silent for a moment, her eyes glowing with determination. "I believe that we can make a difference. If we join forces with the residents and your colleagues, we can build a true neighborhood where everyone respects the other and works for the common good." "I believe that, David." David smiled at his mother and took her hand in his strong hand. "We'll get through this, Mom. I promise you that I won't quit and I'll do everything in my power to make our neighborhood a place we can all be proud of again." Marianne nodded, and tears appeared in her eyes of pride, love, and hope. That's how the evening in the neighborhood ended, but Marianne and David knew that trials, pain, and disappointments lay ahead. Nevertheless, their love for the neighborhood and their desire to protect its residents were stronger than any fear. They were ready to join the fight for justice, restoring trust and respect in every corner of their community. Night fell over the neighborhood, wrapping the streets in shadows. The silence was broken only by the sounds of nocturnal insects and the distant noise of cars. In a small old house on the edge of the neighborhood were three men, Thomas, John, and Ben, men in their early 30s. They had been friends since childhood and had long been part of an informal group that sometimes made trouble in the neighborhood, but now they were united by something more: a hatred for Marianne Brown. Thomas was tall and powerful, with sharp features and eyes full of despair. John was thinner, but his gaze was no less hard. Ben was silent and sullen, always in the shadows of his friends. Together they were a mixture of aggression and frustration that could easily spiral out of control. "That old broad is in our way again," Thomas hissed, pounding his fist on the table in the small, unkempt house. "Yes, Thomas, she thinks she can teach us about life and we just can't stand it," John added, his voice full of anger. Thomas glanced at John and Ben, his eyes gleaming in the dim light of the lamp. He felt that their group had been sidelined from success and respect in the neighborhood for far too long. Marianne Brown was a symbol to them of what they had lost. She was the woman who knew everyone and could influence decisions in the community. It was her authority and independence that made them hate and envy her. "We have to show her that we don't need her advice. We have to make her understand that in our neighborhood we decide what to do, not her," Thomas said with cold determination. "But why the robbery at all? Do we need the money?" Ben asked, silent and thoughtful. "It's not about the money, Ben. It's not about money. It's about respect. She thinks she has the power to teach us, and we're going to show her that her authority is just empty words," Thomas replied. He pulled an old paper-cut map of the neighborhood out of the corner. A light bulb dimly illuminated the map, and Thomas's fingers ran across it, marking Marianne's house. "That's her house. We're going there, and we're showing her that in our neighborhood we decide what's right and what's wrong. We're going to take what she has and we're going to show her that no one needs her advice anymore." John nodded, his eyes alight with a thirst for action. Ben said nothing, but his eyes reflected his inner frustration and emptiness. "We must be quick and silent. No one must see us. We will leave behind only chaos and fear," Thomas continued. Previously, they were part of the same community, where Marianne was a symbol of wisdom and caring, but over time, their life paths diverged. Thomas and his friends found themselves isolated, their dreams of success and respect replaced by disillusionment and criminal behavior. Now they were lost souls who lived in a world where respect could only be earned through strength and fear. "We're coming now. Grab your masks and gloves. Remember, this isn't just a robbery. It's a message for her. Let her know that her advice and authority no longer mean anything to us," Thomas said, standing up confidently from the table. They walked out of the house. Their footsteps were quiet, but their hearts burned with hatred and despair. Their souls seemed to be saturated with disappointment and loss. Each of their actions was no longer just a crime, but a personal challenge to Marianne, who to them was the embodiment of what they had once lost. These three were ready to destroy everything she had built in the neighborhood, to destroy her credibility and show the entire community that in their neighborhood only strength could speak for itself. But what they didn't know was that their actions would have deeper consequences, that their fates would become intertwined with David Brown and an entire community that wasn't ready to give up its soul and future without a fight. That night was the beginning of their determined step into the unknown, into a journey that could be the end of their own world or, conversely, the beginning of a new history for the entire neighborhood. Night shrouded the neighborhood in darkness, and three figures, Thomas, John, and Ben, moved silently toward Marianne's house. The air was tense, their every step permeated with the foreboding of what they were about to do. In their eyes, however, there was not only lust for power and destruction, but also uncertainty. Each of them inwardly felt the power that Marianne represented in their lives, and it left a burning sense of disappointment. Thomas was the first to approach the house and gingerly touched the old but sturdy lock. He took a small hammer from his pocket and struck the lock gently. The door shook weakly and finally gave way. Crawling inside, the trio found themselves in silence. The haze of the old kitchen, with its dusty odor, hung in the air, and each of them felt a strange tension. "Okay, let's go," John whispered, his voice quiet but with a hardness in it. Destroyed objects. Through the hallways, they made their way to the living room. The place was chaos, broken tables, shattered family photos. The bed in the bedroom had been crossed over by the legs of one of the burglars. Thomas smashed a mirror in the corner of the room, and it turned into sharp shards that scattered across the floor. "Now that's a feeling of power," Thomas grinned, feeling a primal adrenaline boost, but a shadow of doubt flashed in the depths of his eyes for a moment. John noticed an old book left on the shelf. It was a book of neighborhood wisdom, a collection of advice from Marianne for local youth. She thought she could explain things to us, John muttered, picking up the book and throwing it out the window. Broken windows. Now they moved on, breaking windows in the rooms. Each pane of glass that fell to the floor made a noise, as if something important was flying off into their own world. But along with this destruction, they felt something more: an inner discomfort. In destroying the house, they were destroying part of what was once important in their own neighborhood. Ben stopped in front of Marianne's picture on the wall. Her smile, which had once been a symbol of care and respect, now seemed almost insulting to him. "That broad lets herself go too much," Ben said, but his voice trembled. He nodded to Thomas, but deep down he doubted his actions. Stolen jewelry. They went to the bedroom where Marianne's jewelry was located: a small jewelry box and an antique ring from her late husband. Thomas opened the jewelry box and grabbed the ring, his eyes glowing with greed. "That's what we need." Thomas raised the ring into the air, but at that moment inner doubts overcame him again. Ben's hands trembled as he noticed an old poster with names and faces depicting their neighbors, people who had once supported them. Those faces were a reminder of what they had lost and what they had become. "We don't want to become everyone's enemy," Ben muttered quietly. But Thomas only pushed him aside. "Don't be a wimp. There's no room for doubt here. We have to show her that we control the neighborhood." The remnants of their doubts. When the last item had been destroyed and the jewelry stolen, the trio walked out of the house. The moon shone in their faces, and they felt the discomfort that always came after destruction. They felt the power, but with it came a strange inner fear. Each of them asked themselves questions. Why did they become what they became? Why did they lose touch with community and mutual support? Can anything else be changed? Thomas stopped in front of the house and looked up at the dark window. "We didn't do it for the money. We did it to show her and everyone else that we're not afraid." But in the back of his mind, he couldn't separate the thought that their actions could have led to the destruction of the entire community they once called home. "But what if we're wrong?" John asked, inwardly doubting their path. Thomas grabbed his shoulder. "We are not making a mistake. We are creating a new order, an order where only power matters." That night was not only the destruction of Marianne's house, but also an internal battle within their own souls. They felt the toughness and power of their actions, but along with it came questions and fears. One day their destructive path could lead them to a moment when they themselves would face the cost of what they had done, the searing realization of lost authority, disunity, and inner frustration. And now, as the trio walked away from Marianne's house, their thoughts were full of questions. Would they be able to recover something lost, to right wrongs, or would their actions already be forever imprinted in the history of the neighborhood as betrayal and destruction? The sky was still dark when Marianne returned home after a visit to the neighborhood store. She was carrying several bags of groceries with a smile, her mood bright, but as she approached her house, her smile disappeared, and her heart clenched with dread. The house that had been her home and a symbol of her life in the neighborhood stood before her. Now it was mangled and broken. Broken windows, broken furniture, things scattered all over the house. Dust and glass remnants were everywhere. Marianne stopped on the porch, her eyes filling with tears. "What happened here?" Her voice was almost inaudible. She stepped inside, her feet heavy. Every destruction, every broken object was like a stab to the heart. Here were her memories, family photos on the walls, old books, and a small box with her late husband's ring. She walked over to the wall where her husband's picture hung. The photograph was now shattered, and pieces of glass lay strewn about. Marianne knelt down, her tears falling on the debris. Why did they do that?" She spoke into the void. David Brown was in the FBI office at this time. The phone was ringing, but right now he couldn't disconnect from his own thoughts. He had just finished an important case in a nearby neighborhood and was ready to go home. But when his mother called and told him what had happened, he dropped everything and rushed to the neighborhood. As he pulled up to the house, his heart quickened with terror. David got out of the car and walked toward the ruined house. He felt not just anger, but inner pain. Who could have done this? David asked himself, looking around at the broken windows and broken furniture. He saw her suffering and it made his heart clench with pain, but at the same time there was determination in his eyes. It's not just a robbery, this is a challenge, a direct challenge to the entire community and what we've built together in the neighborhood. David was beginning to realize that destroying Marianne's house was not a personal crime, it was a message to the entire neighborhood. A message that there were forces that defied order and mutual aid. These forces were not just looting and destroying, but wanted to show that force and fear would now rule the neighborhood. David approached his mother's house, and his gaze met hers. She was sitting on an old couch in the ruined living room, eyes full of pain and despair. "David, I'm sorry, but what are we going to do? They're not afraid of anyone anymore. These guys are lost in their lives and they don't hear anything," Marianne muttered, her voice shaking with tears. "Mom, this isn't just a crime, it's a challenge for the entire community. I feel like we're facing a battle that will change everything," David replied, determination and commitment in his voice. David looked at the destroyed objects, at Marianne's late husband's antique ring lying among the rubble. He felt the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. "We can't just stand by and watch it all fall apart. I have a responsibility to protect not only you, but all those who believed in what we've built in this neighborhood." He remembered all the initiatives and programs his mother had organized in the area: training centers for young people, self-help meetings and advice for local youth. Marianne was the link that held the community together. Now all of that was shattered, and David realized that this battle would not only be for order and law, but for the soul of their neighborhood, for the belief that their community could be a place where people cared for each other and supported mutual aid. "We have to show them that we don't give up, that there is strength, resilience and honor in our neighborhood." David began calling his colleagues in the FBI and local police, discussing the situation. He called a meeting with neighborhood leaders, street activists, and local community members. Together they developed an action plan: restorative activities to support local youth, mentoring programs, regaining the trust of residents through meetings and initiatives. But the most important thing was to restore personal respect and faith that their neighborhood could overcome this darkness. "We have to take our neighborhood back, but to do that, we need to work together. Community forces can be powerful if we all come together," David told his comrades. But there was anxiety in David's soul. He realized that the fight would not be easy. These young boys who had destroyed his mother's home weren't just enemies, they were lost souls, and each of them had a story to tell, a story of disappointment, loss, and pain. David looked into his mother's eyes and reached out, hugging her. "We have to show them that there is another way, that in our neighborhood, respect, hard work and honesty are strength. We can do it, Mom. Together we will rebuild everything." Marianne nodded, her eyes filled with renewed determination. That night was the beginning of a new mission for David, a battle not only to rebuild his destroyed home, but also for the soul of the neighborhood. He knew there would be trials, hardship and loss ahead, but he was ready. Together with Marianne and the entire community, they had to restore faith that their neighborhood would once again be a place where people cared for, supported and respected each other. The first burst of light pierced the dark horizon as David finally returned to the site of the destroyed house. Additional FBI and local police cars pulled up, their headlights creating bright spots of light in the night darkness. David felt the tension, but also the inner strength that grew in him with each new step. He stood in front of the broken window and scrutinized the wreckage, trying to visualize exactly what had happened here. "Let's start with the cameras. Where are they located?" David asked one of the locals, old John Smither, who had lived in the neighborhood for years. "There's a camera at the corner of 6th Street and Main Avenue. They always work there," John replied, pointing with his hand. David nodded and walked over to the car where his colleagues were sitting, Agent Amelia Carter and forensics specialist Stephen Brown. They quickly started checking all possible evidence. Amelia plugged the camera into her laptop. She scrolled through the footage of the last few hours. The images were in high resolution, and soon they found 3 people making their way to Marianne's house. They were all wearing dark clothing and masks. "Look at their movements. They're professionals. They know what they're doing," Amelia remarked. "There are fingerprints on the broken windows and doors," Stephen said as he examined the window opening. He carefully wiped the prints off and began to analyze them. "We'll start searching the database for them." David could feel the tension. He knew the FBI database might not immediately provide answers, especially in an area where many young people lived illegally and were isolated from the outside world. But he felt that working with the local community could be their biggest find. David and Amelia traveled the nearby streets, chatting with the residents. The residents of the neighborhood knew every person, every look and every rumor, but trust between the FBI and the local community was complicated. "The people who did this aren't just street guys, they're locals. I've seen them on the streets many times," said Marcus, a small store owner. He held the bag of groceries tightly, his gaze anxious. "Can you recognize them by their faces or their clothes?" Amelia asked. There's this guy, Jason. He's kind of the leader around here. The guy with the white sneakers, always wearing a dark jacket. Marcus pointed toward the street. Amelia jotted down the information in her notebook. Thank you, Marcus. It's important for us to know everything you see and hear. Amelia looked into the shopkeeper's eyes. Together with local residents, David and Amelia set up a temporary headquarters right in the old district office building. There were operational maps, photographs, and laptops. Every trace found in Marianne's house, every fingerprint, every camera recording was now part of the investigation. We need to go deeper into the neighborhood and talk directly to the guys. David gathered all the agents together. Not just as FBI, we have to come as those who grew up here, those who know them, understand them and can speak their language. Amelia nodded. David went to the darkest and most unsafe corners of the neighborhood. There were old abandoned houses, hidden alleys, and places where even the police didn't dare show up without backup. There's a place deep down 6th Street where the young fellows gather. Old neighbor Pete said of the place, his eyes full of fear. When David walked over there, he saw several guys in dark clothes playing a card game. In their eyes was a willingness to be challenged and the ability to survive in difficult conditions. Hey guys, I'm David Brown. I grew up here. I need to talk. He stepped closer, his voice confident but friendly. One of the guys, tall Jason, broke away from the game and looked at David. What do you want, David? We're handling ourselves here. Jason's voice was rough. We lost a lot in this neighborhood. Marianne has lost her home. We're losing trust. We need to fix that, David replied. Over time, after intense conversations and information sharing, he began to gain their respect. Jason and his friends began to talk about some young guys, groups that were looking to wreak havoc in the neighborhood, looking to gain their place. These guys weren't just criminals. They were part of a destructive circle that David knew needed to be broken. If we want to change all this, we need the community's help, and we need your support, Jason. David held out his hand in a sign of peace. Okay, David, if you're really in favor of us, let's clean up together. Jason nodded. When David returned to headquarters, he was filled with a new determination. He was now convinced that this was more than an investigation. It was a way of getting back to the basics, the mutual aid, authority and strength of the community. They began to develop a strategy where local residents, activists, and FBI agents would work together to regain trust and respect in the neighborhood. There was a battle ahead, but now David felt they were not alone. The strength of the neighborhood, its history and community spirit could be their strongest weapon against a destructive force that wanted to destroy everything they had built. The footprints they found were more than just fingerprints. They were a map of their future, a path of restoration, love and neighborhood unity, ready to face any challenge and keep it bright in memory and community spirit. The community center was a place where residents of the district gathered. Various meetings were held here, training centers for young people were organized and even festivals were held. Today, the center was filled to capacity. People sat on plastic chairs and stood against the walls, their eyes filled with anxiety and pain. David stood on the stage in front of the microphone. His gaze scanned the audience, faces full of fatigue, frustration and fear, but among them was determination, a desire to regain what had been lost. Thank you for coming here today. We have gathered to talk about what has happened in our neighborhood. We lost trust, we lost our home, but most importantly, we lost ourselves. David's voice was firm, but he spoke with warmth. He was silent for a moment, giving people time to comprehend what he had said. I want to hear your voices. Tell me about the situations you have experienced, about those conflicts, encounters with criminals. We need to understand what's really going on. The first to stand up was Johnny Gray, owner of a small butcher store. David, I've been working here for 15 years. These guys who destroyed Marianne's house are the same guys I've seen on the streets every day. They're killing our business. They keep us up at night. Johnny's voice shook. But where does it start? Why do they act like this? David asked. It's because of hopelessness. Young people are losing faith in the future, in work, in the law. They see that you can get everything in a day if you just choose a different path. Johnny shook his head. Next up was Laura Simpson, a teacher at a local school. A lot of these guys are former students. I know them by name, but now they're getting lost, and I can't get them back in class. The parents work too much. They can't supervise them at home. Our system doesn't support them. Her words caused a deep silence in the hall. I know we have problems that go deep into the family and into the community, but how can we fix it together? What steps can we take to restore faith in the community and give young people a different path? David asked the audience. After several hours of discussion, a collective realization began to dawn in the room that change was only possible through unity and cooperation. People began to share ideas and propose concrete steps. Marianne stood up and her voice echoed through the hall. We have to organize programs for the youth, training, master classes, mentoring, to show them that there is a way where you can work, learn and have a future, she said confidently. We can have self-help meetings for parents to discuss how to better manage their home and how to communicate with their children, suggested Peter Hall, a neighborhood elder. We need to bring the streets back under community control. We need community patrols to keep order and keep the neighborhoods connected. David seconded the motion. These ideas led to the creation of the Community Council, a group made up of people of all ages and backgrounds, teachers, business people, youth and elders. The council has organized programs within the local community center. 1. Workshops and training for youth, from auto repair programs to lessons in programming and marketing. 2. Mentoring programs where successful local men and women became mentors to young kids, showing them that success is possible through honest work and respect for the community. 3. Neighborhood evening meetings every Tuesday. The streets were transformed into discussion spaces where everyone could come and talk about problems and solutions. With each new step, the neighborhood began to rebuild trust. David saw street boys who previously seemed hopeless begin to join the trainings and workshops. Parents were more involved in their children's lives. Businesses were slowly returning to the neighborhood and the streets were filled with life again. But David knew this was only the beginning. The problems were deep and would not be solved overnight. Behind every success hid new challenges and deep hatred from those who didn't want to see change. However, the community council began to face resistance. Jason, the leader of a local gang, took to the streets, not wanting to lose his power. He began to threaten those who cooperated with the council, destroying projects and disrupting initiatives. If you keep this up, the neighborhood will only get worse, he warned David, his voice full of threats and hardness. But David answered, we will not give up. We will give this neighborhood back to those who believe in it. If we have to fight for it, we'll do it together as a community. Over time, David realized that he would need more than a community initiative to ultimately win. He needed a plan for real engagement with city government, the support of the FBI and local activists. The community began to gain new allies and a belief that their efforts could return the neighborhood to normalcy. But the war was far from over. David and Marianne were ready to move on, strengthening ties, inspiring and uniting people. Now they faced a major battle to restore not only physical order, but also the soul of the neighborhood. And only together, with faith in common goals and cooperation, could they defeat the forces that wanted to see their community destroyed and lost. In an abandoned house at the end of 6th Street, Jason and his boys, Ricky and Tommy, sat in the dark. They were discussing their actions, pondering what had happened to Marianne's house. It seemed that their rigidity had brought only emptiness and a feeling of being unwanted. We showed her who's boss. Ricky grinned, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. And what did we get in return? Jason leaned back, leaning against the old wall. We only ruined something. We didn't make any money, and now even people who used to respect us hate us. Hey, Jason, did you see that old man at the store? He burned our eyes out. Says we're losing the trust of the community. Tommy sighed. Jason felt uncomfortable. He was the leader of the gang, but now his confidence was shaken. This wasn't just a street fight. This was a challenge to everything he once knew about his neighborhood. The next day, the residents of the neighborhood organized a meeting in a small hall of the community center. The elders, including Peter Hall and Marianne, gathered there to discuss the situation. The purpose of the meeting was one thing: to try to bring Jason and his boys back into the community, to show them that there is another way. Marianne entered the hall. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of determination. She was in simple work clothes. Her voice was strong and unadorned. I want to know what's going on in our neighborhood. We're all one family here. We can't lose each other. Her voice filled the hall. At that time the doors opened, and Jason, Ricky, and Tommy walked in. Their eyes were frowning, and they looked tired and depressed. We didn't come to fight again. We came to hear, Jason said, answering Marianne's stare. We did what we did because we felt we had nothing to lose. But you didn't do this destruction for money. You destroyed trust. You destroyed our neighborhood. Why? Peter Hall, an elder, asked. We're showing that no one is going to tell us what to do, Jason replied. We don't believe in the system, in the police, in mentors. It's all just words. Marianne stepped closer to Jason, her voice softer but still powerful. Jason, I know you. You were my student. I saw potential in you. You were better than this, better than destruction and hate. You could change your life, help your neighborhood. Her eyes met his. Jason was silent. He felt the inner conflict that was beginning to plague his soul. We've all made mistakes, Marianne continued, but now we need to fix them together. The community, friends, we can be better. We can rebuild everything, but it's going to take everyone's efforts. Ricky suddenly stood up and said, but what if it's just too late for us? His voice was slightly broken. We won't get back the lost time and respect. Marianne put her hand on his shoulder. We will return respect not with words but with deeds. We will rebuild schools, open training centers, take up sports and work. We will do it together. Let's start now. These words sparked a little conversation in the audience. The elders began to talk about returning support from the FBI and city government. Marianne suggested creating a mentoring and renewal program where older residents would help the youth find their way through hard work and responsibility. We must show that there is no other way but honest labor and respect for the common home, Marianne concluded. Later, Jason and Marianne were alone in a corner of the center. He never took his eyes off the woman who had once been his teacher and mentor. Marianne, I have a hard time believing all of this. I've seen the world fall apart. Jason shook his head. But we have strength, not in destruction, but in love, in respect. The community isn't just people, it's our home, and you are part of that home. Marianne smiled. She held out her hand in a gesture of reconciliation. Jason hesitated, but then held out his hand in return. Okay, let's give it a try, together. This meeting ushered in a new era of collaboration in the neighborhood. Jason and Marianne began working together to discuss plans to open sports sections for youth and renovate abandoned properties in the neighborhood. The police and FBI also began working with the community council to bring more order and trust to the neighborhood. David watched the beginning of this collaboration. He felt that hatred was now giving way to solution and destruction to restoration, but he also knew there would be challenges ahead. The mentoring program was just beginning and the trust between the parties was fragile. The problems had not disappeared, but there was now hope that change was possible. The message was clear, not hate, but cooperation and labor would bring their neighborhood back to life, back to order and, most importantly, back to community unity, which would only be restored through mutual faith and respect. A few weeks after the meeting at the community center, the neighborhood began to come alive with new initiatives. The community council, along with David and Marianne, developed an ambitious plan called the Mentoring and Collaboration Program, which was intended to be a bridge between youth, older generations, and local professionals. The main goal of the program was simple but challenging to implement, to enable young people to learn, work, and return to the neighborhood while contributing to its recovery. David began to attract specialists from different fields: electricians, builders, programmers, doctors. They were all willing to share their knowledge and experience. The program included jobs, training, and the opportunity to obtain certificates that could become the hallmark of a successful future. Training area and craft center. The community council restored an old abandoned building on 6th Street and turned it into a craft and learning center. Now it was not only a training center, but also a place where young people could immediately put their knowledge into practice. Next door was a small construction site where students could learn the basics of building and repair. Johnny Gray, a butcher store owner who became one of the program's mentors, worked here. Every brick you lay isn't just a job, it's an investment in your future and the future of the neighborhood, Johnny told his students as he showed them masonry techniques. Electricians worked to restore street lighting, and programmers conducted courses on the basics of coding. One of these specialists, a young girl named Amira, came to the district after graduating from university. She taught programming and basic web design to children and teenagers. The future is technology. If you can become experts in this field, you can work in any company and even create your own business, Amira told her students. Each of the mentors brought their experience and history to the program. The district elders began organizing regular meetings with the youth to discuss life values, hard work and respect. Marianne took on the important role of liaison. She held meetings for parents and children, helping to build trust in families and discussing how important communication is in the home. We must return to the old days when neighborhoods were the foundation of our strength. Together we protect this neighborhood, Marianne told residents. One day, at the craft center, Jason, the leader of the local gang, came to talk to David. Now he was no longer just a rebel, but a man who saw the possibility of a new path. I can work here. Show guys there's another way, Jason offered. David nodded. We'll give you the opportunity to be a mentor. Young people deserve a second chance, he replied. That's how Jason's work in the mentoring program began. He became one of those who showed young people that life on the streets was not the only way. Instead, there was training, work, career advancement, and respect. After a few months, the program began to show its first results. Many young people found stable jobs in construction, IT, and trade. The Crafts Center became a place where everyone could find support and direction. But there were also difficulties. Some guys who initially resisted change went back to their old habits. They did not believe in change and thought that the program was just another ploy by the local elders and David. What if I find myself out of work again? Where do I go from here? Jason asks one of the young guys standing at the construction site. Don't give up. There are those who believe in you. We're not just working for money, we're working for the neighborhood, for the family. Let's show together that we can do more, Jason urged them. Over time, respect between the different groups in the neighborhood began to grow. Difficulties were replaced by successes. Community events organized by the community council became popular. Sports tournaments, fairs, concerts, and workshops attracted more and more people and strengthened the bond between neighbors. David and Marianne were not only organizers but also symbols of change. Their story was an example that even in the most difficult situations, recovery and cooperation are possible. We're not just building homes and centers, we're building the future, and that future belongs to all of us, David said at the community council meeting. But not all problems were solved. An old enemy reappeared on the horizon. Jason continued to be at the center of change, but with him, old elements of violence began to appear in the neighborhood. In the early morning hours, as the construction center was just starting up, there was a scream. A young boy from the mentoring program had been beaten by unknown assailants. This was the first major blow to the community council's efforts. David and Marianne realized that they now needed deeper support from the police, additional resources, and even more cooperation from all the residents. They decided to start a new collaboration involving local government and federal resources, but it required even more determination and effort. The community council brought everyone together: youth, elders, businessmen, and government officials. They began planning a large-scale project to rebuild trust and create a social program for those who were still hesitant about old habits. We're not backing down. We're rebuilding not only the homes, but the soul of the neighborhood, David concluded. Marianne added, this neighborhood is our heritage and we must protect it for the future. Only together, through hard work and unity, can we overcome anything. Though there were challenges ahead, the neighborhood began to gain the cooperative, hardworking, and respectful atmosphere that was once the foundation of their community. And now they knew change was possible, but it required working harder than ever, believing in everyone who was waiting for a second chance, and protecting the community as a united and unbreakable force. Over time, the 6th Street neighborhood began to transform. A mentoring and co-op program not only provided training and work opportunities for young people, but also strengthened the bonds between residents. The streets were now cleaner, stores were reopening, and old houses were getting a new facade. But most importantly, human relations improved. The residents were no longer hiding from each other. They became neighbors in the true sense of the word, ready to help in any situation. Marianne and David saw how trust and mutual help were born in every corner of the neighborhood. Every Sunday the neighborhood now had general meetings to discuss local problems and find solutions. These meetings were held in the new community center, where there was space for discussions, meetings, training, and even small celebrations. Marianne became the soul of these meetings. She talked about the importance of being part of a community, helping each other and working together for the common good. Our neighborhood is not just streets and houses, it is people who together create our future. We are only strong when we are together, she said at one of the meetings. David worked extensively with new mentors, monitoring training and employment programs, and checking on the success of projects and new jobs. He saw each successful graduate of the program not only as a future employee, but also as a community leader. Many young people who were once on the edge of crime have now found meaning in work and learning. One such person was Ryan James. He was one of the most notorious guys in the neighborhood and had once been part of a gang, but was now one of the top students in the construction program. "I've been where many of you have been, but now I'm building the future, not ruins," Ryan told his peers. With each successful project, Ryan inspired others. He became a symbol of change and opportunity for all. Amira, a young girl who taught programming at the Crafts Center, also brought her energy and ambition to the community. She organized a web design class for children, where everyone could create their first website. "We need to learn now so we can create our own businesses tomorrow and help our neighborhood grow," Amira said. Elders, including Peter Hall and Marianne, have become mentors to youth and founders of local support programs. They organized clubs for the older generation, where young people helped the elderly around the house, and the elders in turn shared life lessons and experiences. These meetings became places of mutual support and deep conversations about life. Peter Hall often reminded young people, "A true legacy is not only what we build, but what we leave for the future. Respect, hard work and support are what will be the foundation of our community." The 6th Street community began organizing cultural events such as fairs, concerts, and local art exhibits. Neighborhood artists created murals depicting the history and spirit of their community. These works became symbols of change and new energy. Marianne and David supported local musicians and organized meetings where anyone could show their talent. Music and art became an important part of the social life of the neighborhood, showing that the community has its own face and spirit. Additional infrastructure renewal projects were launched jointly with the district administration and the FBI. Street lighting was improved, roads and schools were repaired. These projects created jobs and showed that cooperation between the community and the authorities was working. David became the community council representative in constant communication with the city administration, proposing new projects and finding funding to implement them. "We're not just creating homes and jobs, but a culture of respect and responsibility. That is the future of the neighborhood," he said during one of the council meetings. But even this revitalized neighborhood had its challenges. Some of the old groups who had not yet accepted the change were trying to return to their old ways. Their attempts to bring back the old ways caused conflict. However, thanks to the mentoring program and community support, these attempts were quickly quelled. David and Marianne strengthened cooperation among the residents, teaching them that community unity is their real strength. They held additional meetings where they invited former program participants and those who were getting back on track. "We must not forget where we came from, but our way is the way of support and respect, not destruction and hatred," Marianne summarized the regular meeting. Over time, 6th Street was no longer just a neighborhood. It became an example that change is possible if there is a common goal and a willingness to work together. Social change brought stability, trust and respect. Marianne and David have continued to inspire the next generation by showing that there is room in their neighborhood for the future, for success, creativity and growth. But there were new challenges and tasks ahead of them. The 6th Street community had to prove that it could be an example for other neighborhoods in the city. Now they were not just defenders of their neighborhood, but creators of a new path for all those who were looking for meaning in life and the opportunity to be part of something bigger. "We will work, learn and protect. Our neighborhood is our family, and we must preserve it for the future," Marianne repeated, each time inspiring those who believed in the power of change. Over time, 6th Street became a place where respect and mutual aid were not just words, but a model of life in which each person could find his or her place, meaning and way forward. The bustling streets of 6th Street gradually ceased to be places of conflict and tension. Now there was a spirit of change and opportunity. The mentoring program showed that dreams can become reality and hard work brings success. Marianne was proud of each success, each young person who found their place in this new life. She saw them as the future of the neighborhood, a place where respect, hard work and success replaced fear and hate. One of the shining examples of success is Ryan James. He went from being a rebel and gang member to a successful builder and mentor for new program participants. Now he was not just working on a construction site, but also teaching young people how to lay bricks and build a future. "I used to be the one who destroyed. Now I'm the one who builds. We have to protect our neighborhood and create a future for it," Ryan said while standing on a construction site. His story was an inspiration to others. Ryan became not only a symbol of change, but also an example that success is possible even in the most difficult situations. Amira, a young female programmer, transformed the Crafts Center into a place where technology and creativity were the foundation of the future. She conducted programming workshops for children and teenagers, teaching them the basics of creating websites and apps. One of her students was Jacoby Thompson, a 15-year-old boy from one of the neighborhood's most troubled families. Thanks to Amira's support and the mentoring program, Jacoby started building his first web applications and dreamed of becoming a developer. "I can be anything I want to be. If I study and work, I have a future," Jacoby told his friends. Over time, Jacoby became one of the leading participants in the program and began to help Amir teach other children. His success became a symbol that it is possible to choose the right path, even if the past has been difficult. Marianne was particularly proud of the success of women in the neighborhood. Many of them found their place in new social projects, businesses and educational initiatives. A woman named Kimberly Jones, who was once a housewife and couldn't find a job, now ran a small local cafe. This cafe became a meeting place for residents to exchange news, discuss projects and just talk. "Every cup of coffee is a step towards our community. We support each other here," Kimberly said, smiling at visitors. She partnered with Ryan and Amira to offer cafe jobs to graduates of the mentoring program. These new opportunities demonstrated that community support works not only through initiatives, but also in everyone's daily lives. The community began to see the youth who came through the mentoring program as future leaders of the neighborhood. David began to see these young people as potential leaders of the community council and organizers of community events. He started organizing special meetings where successful graduates of the program could share their experiences and motivate others. A young girl named Tonya Miller, who became a successful designer and owner of a small boutique, spoke about the importance of hard work and aspiration. "We are the ones who create the future. If each of us contributes to our neighborhood, it will become a place we will be proud of," Tonya said. David realized that these were the people who would be the foundation of new leadership in the neighborhood. They were an example to those who were still hesitant to change, showing that success is possible through hard work and cooperation. The community began revitalizing public spaces, turning them into parks, playgrounds and places to walk. These projects were the result of a collaborative effort between all residents and a local mentoring program. Children and teenagers participated in creating graffiti on the walls depicting the history of their neighborhood. The elders talked about the neighborhood's past, passing on knowledge and wisdom, and the youth found strength for the future. One of the most significant projects was the new Fifth Avenue Center. It hosted concerts, exhibitions, sports tournaments and fairs. "We're creating a place where everyone can come and feel like they're needed and important here," David said while overseeing concerts at the center. Every resident of the neighborhood was now part of a unified support system. Social groups and volunteers organized help for those who could not yet find a job. Marianne personally visited families, helping parents and children with housework and schoolwork. "We support each other not just with words, but with actions. If someone is in trouble, we help. That's how we build our community," Marianne said. These initiatives helped strengthen the bonds between residents and showed that there was room for mutual support and solidarity in the neighborhood. Marianne and David saw not only the current transformation of the neighborhood, but also a future in which 6th Street would become a place of prosperity and opportunity. They dreamed of their neighborhood becoming a model for other neighborhoods in the city and across the country. "We're not just rebuilding homes and streets, we are restoring the belief that hard work, respect and cooperation can create a better future for all," David said, inspiring the local community council. Marianne continued to see the successes of each young person as they found their place in their new lives. She knew that their successes were not only personal achievements, but also a contribution to the future of the entire community. "We're not finishing, this is just the beginning. There are new challenges, new successes and opportunities ahead," said Marianne, confident that 6th Street will be a place where everyone can find their purpose and be part of a great future. As summer came to a close, the 6th Street neighborhood was filled with new energy. Marianne decided it was time to strengthen the community through culture and creativity. She organized a series of cultural events and festivals where every resident could contribute and showcase their individuality and uniqueness. First up was a large-scale arts and crafts fair that attracted people from all over the area. Local artists exhibited their work, local artisans sold unique products, and talented musicians played on stages, creating an atmosphere of celebration and inspiration. Marianne wanted everyone to be able to see that there was a lot of talent and opportunity in their neighborhood. She went to local artists and craftsmen and offered them a place to work at the Crafts Center, supporting their ideas and initiatives. We're not just rebuilding homes and roads, we're rebuilding community spirit. Let each of us show what we can do for our neighborhood, Marianne said at one of the meetings at the Craft Center. To foster mutual help and cooperation, an annual Community Day Festival was organized. All 6th Street residents participated in this event where there was room for volunteering, sharing, food, music and dancing. This festival set up temporary stages for musicians, organized fairs for artisans and vendors, and held workshops for children and adults. In the center of the square was a space for cooking demonstrations, where local families prepared traditional dishes while telling stories about their roots and the neighborhood's past. David organized volunteer groups to set up stages and equipment, and Ryan helped organize logistics and coordinate the workflow. This festival is our way of showing that each of us matters, that we are only strong together, Ryan said as he helped set up the stages. 6th Street social groups began organizing events where elders shared their life experiences and youth helped in keeping the streets clean and restoring old buildings. Local music became the heart of the neighborhood. The streets were filled with the sounds of rap, jazz and rock. Young musicians organized street concerts where everyone could show off their talents. These concerts attracted residents of all ages and strengthened friendships. Marianne initiated a music school at the Craft Center where children and teens could learn to play instruments and the basics of the music industry. Tonya Miller, a former student of the mentoring program, opened a small studio for recording music where everyone was welcome to come. Music is not only creative, but a way to come together and show that we are one community, Tonya said as she helped the boys and girls record their first tracks. The community engaged in the restoration and renovation of public spaces. Ecological zones and gardens were created where residents grew plants and flowers. These projects not only improved the appearance of the neighborhood, but also instilled the importance of caring for the environment. David organized the Green Power Project, in which local families and youth planted trees and flowers throughout the neighborhood. Ryan and other mentors joined the project, teaching children how to care for plants and create small parks in the most inconspicuous places. Every tree, every plant is a contribution to the future of our neighborhood. We are preserving what we do today, Ryan said as he planted another garden. With each new project and activity, the relationships between residents were strengthened. Now there were several permanent self-help groups in the neighborhood. They were organized to help the elderly, large families and those in difficult life situations. David and Marianne were personally involved in delivering groceries and helping those in need. Marianne often visited the homes of the elderly, asking if they needed help with household chores or just a conversation. Community is not just a place where people live, it's a place where everyone cares for everyone else, Marianne said. This mutual aid was the foundation of the new life of the neighborhood, where respect and caring were core values. Marianne and David saw the neighborhood not only as revitalized homes and streets, but as a community where everyone mattered. 6th Street became a place where people came not only to live, but also to create something meaningful for themselves and others. Social initiatives and cultural events showed that respect and cooperation can overcome any barriers. Marianne dreamed that their neighborhood would become an example for other cities and countries where communities work together for the common good. We have built this community, but our work is just beginning. The future depends on all of us. We must continue to work, learn and help each other. Marianne concluded her speech at one of the last community council meetings. Now 6th Street was no longer just a neighborhood in the city, but a symbol of the power of community, creativity and collaboration, where everyone could find their place and contribute to a future full of opportunity and respect. In 6th Street Square, neighborhood residents gathered in the evening hours, their eyes shining with pride and hope. There was an atmosphere of change. Marianne stood in the center of the square, her gaze penetrating the faces of people young and old, those who had been through hardships and those who were just starting out. Nearby was David and other community leaders, Ryan, Tonya, Amiru and a host of others who have become the faces of change at 6th Street. We stand here today not just as residents of one neighborhood, we stand here as a symbol of what is possible when community works together, Marianne began. Her voice was deep and confident. with wisdom and love for every corner of their neighborhood. She knew her mission didn't end with just rebuilding homes and creating jobs. It was more than physical transformation. It was a challenge to the entire community, a call for respect, cooperation, and resilience. Marianne and David discussed that their experience could be used in other neighborhoods in the city and even beyond. They dreamed of creating a community academy, a place where representatives from other neighborhoods could come and learn how to rebuild and manage social projects. We need to show others that change is possible, that everyone, regardless of the past, can be part of a better future, David said. This academy will be a center of exchange and collaboration where local leaders, teachers, engineers, and young people can learn how to create a sustainable community. Marianne decided to leave a monument in the center of the neighborhood, a symbol of their overcoming. It was not just a stone or a statue, it was a symbol of resilience and love, an embodiment of faith in a better future. A message was carved on the monument: for all future generations, remember that change starts in your heart. The strength of the community is in each and every one of us. Respect, hard work, and caring are what make us stronger. We are the ones who build the future, and that future belongs to everyone. She asked Ryan and Tonya to talk about the symbolism of the monument. This monument is a reminder that changes don't happen by accident. They require labor, patience, and love. We did it together, and each of us became a part of that history, Ryan said. Tonya added, we believe that each of you will continue on this journey. Let 6th Street be a place where everyone can find their purpose and be a part of the community's history. Marianne realized that her time had come to an end. She walked over to David and looked him in the eye. David, I am handing you this mission. You are a new leader, and I know you will continue to protect and grow our neighborhood. Remember, this is not just a place, it's a family where everyone matters. David nodded, his eyes full of determination. I promise, Marianne, I will continue on your path, preserving our values and creating a future that everyone will be proud of. Marianne hugged him and looked at her old friends Ryan, Tonya, Amira. These people were an example that a community could overcome any obstacle if there was a belief in cooperation and mutual aid. Late at night, when the square was empty, Marianne stood alone. The stars shone over 6th Street, symbolizing the infinity of possibilities and change. She closed her eyes and thought of all the people who had once gone through hardships and found the strength to move on. Marianne believed that their work, their sacrifices, and their dreams were not in vain. Community is not only where we live, it is where we grow, learn, and become better. May 6th Street always be a place of strength, respect, and love, she whispered into the night. Marianne remained a symbol of resilience and love, inspiring everyone by her example. She knew that change at 6th Street was only the beginning of a great journey. May their story be an example to all who will someday want to believe in a better future. She stepped into the darkness of the streets, confident that 6th Street would thrive because it is in the cooperation, respect, and love of community that lies the power to change everything. Thank you for your attention and for letting this story be a part of your day. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. See you again.